Good day, everybody. Welcome to Boulder, Colorado, and joined by somebody who I've done a couple of radio interviews with, and it's a delight to meet her in person. High Priestess Dayna Seraye, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thanks, Jake.
Can you talk about when you first came to Boulder? Did you feel an instant connection to the place? And because if I remember correctly, you wound up finishing high school here and you've never left. Can you talk about how you felt when you first came here?
Actually, I remember coming here as a child with my parents. We would come through Colorado and ski quite a bit, and I remember having an experience of coming through Boulder and hearing a voice. I thought it was one of my parents say to me that we would live here someday, and it was very strong, this inner knowing, this sense of connection to this place. But when I actually spoke with them about that sometime after we moved here, neither of them remember that or had that kind of feeling or premonition like I had received in that moment. So it was interesting because I don't know if that voice actually came from them, or it came from the land, or it came from the spirit, or it came from my own guidance. But I remember that was very strong. We would live here someday. So that was when I was a child, and then I ended up moving out here when I was about 17, and it was very strong. It was my choice. I was a junior in high school, and I wasn't really the type of high school student that was really that. I was engaged. I did well in school, but I wasn't into the social dynamics. I wasn't into high school really. I was ready to move on. All my friends had graduated already, and so there was this draw out here. I had been out here. I had a friend who moved out here. My brother went to college out here, and so there was this strong call. And my dad and I decided we would up and move to Boulder, and my mom sort of had to come along. So there was a very.
So your folks did move here?
My folks live here. Yep.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, they live here, and it was great. I got here, and I did end up finishing high school, but it sort of felt like I was already in college, and it's a fun town.
How does that work? You just were a non-traditional cat from the get-go.
I was non-traditional, and Boulder is a pretty liberal place, and the high school was pretty liberal, and so I had some free periods. I did photography. I'd wander around the land. I remember dropping a friend and I, and we were taking physics, and we decided we would drop physics and we would do an independent study and study quantum physics instead. That was sort of how I approached I want to learn this way. These are my interests and passions, and we actually never ended up doing that independent study, but we would go down to the river and we would talk about it during that period, my friend and I. So there was an element of very non-traditional and kind of. So that was my entry into Boulder, and it was beautiful. It was fun to be here, and stimulating, way more exciting than where I'd come from.
Your organization that you are the co-director of, Hanuman, you went to India last year, and I'd like you to talk. My gut tells me that you've been there before, but can you talk about your experience there?
Absolutely.
Because you were already steeped in teachings, in the ancient ways, the Hindu ancient ways, through reading, and maybe other teachers that you had here. But I'd like you to talk about just some spiritual experience that has stayed with you since that journey.
Well, the first time I went to India was last March, so
it was your first time?
Just over a year ago. I went to India for the first time, and I was very, very called to go because I did have a lot of great teachers here in terms of yoga. We were just talking about Sophia Diaz, who was my first teacher, and incredible. She really brings the lineage. She brings a classical, very devotional approach to yoga, which was something that I was really grateful that was my pathway in, because here in the West it can be a little superficial. We're really into our bodies. We're really, there's a bit of a showiness, the yoga clothes, the whole deal. So I was really grateful that I found my way into yoga through her, because it was very much a subtle body practice, a devotional practice, a practice of really getting to know ourselves, that self-inquiry that yoga leads us to, and an internal practice as opposed to, wow, how do I look? So I was really grateful for that. She's amazing. And at the same time, I was very in the yoga world through Hanuman Festival, and while there are amazing teachers, there's sort of this, I've always been very interested in healing and transformation, and I went towards the shamanic practices, towards somatic psychotherapy, towards wisdom traditions, indigenous wisdom traditions, and that's where I really was finding more of that healing, like the depth of the healing that I was interested in, and I was missing that in yoga. Like I said, I just feel like it can be a little bit on the surface sometimes, the way that we approach things in the West in general. And so I was really I was missing something. Even in my own teaching, I brought forward the transformational, shamanic kind of aspects as much as I could. And there was something that I just knew that I was going to India to find. And so when I went to India that first time, I actually brought a group there. We did a Hanuman adventure, we did a retreat, brought a group there and went to study with Anand Mehrotra, who's become my teacher in India, and he is a really amazing being who is transmitting some really deep wisdom. Straight from the line of the Himalayas, from the rishis, right there in Rishikesh, where the rishis walk the path still, and it's just really full of that frequency of consciousness. The consciousness level is very different in Rishikesh, where I've spent time. There is the Ganga flows through there. There is a palpable difference, and one of my friends speaks about that this energy of India is like this chaos and this grace. And one of the things that I find powerful is that, here in America, sometimes our chaos can be very hidden. It's like there's order everywhere we look. There's, very nicely cut grass, and everybody drives, the roads the way they're supposed to. But the chaos is really underneath the surface. There's so much anxiety and fear, and there's a lot that we don't see that's hidden, and we hide it all, we suppress it. Whereas in India, it's like the chaos is everywhere. There's cows in the street, there's honking horns, there's people, there's kids, there's monkeys. It's like wild on the surface.
Very overt.
It's very overt.
And it's kind of covert here.
It's very covert here, but the grace is also just like right there with the chaos. It's like both are on the surface in this just exceptionally powerful way. And it teaches you so much about surrender. Like you can't, be in a place like that and find your heart, find your ground without like, wow, just totally surrendering. Because if you're in your controlling mind, in your ego, you're in your like, you want things to be ordered, it's not gonna happen. And so it teaches, there's like powerful lessons that I've received in India about like, we find that grace. We get to drop into that place, and then the chaos on the surface doesn't affect us anymore. And it's also, a powerful lesson around just being willing to like sit in the mess and be messy and be,
Can you give an example of sitting in the Dayna Seraye sitting in a mess and thriving in it?
I think that example, there's horns honking. We like my teacher Anand would talk about how Westerners are we're sensitive, especially spiritualized ones. Like, I can't be in, let's say Walmart or a big King Supers or, because the fluorescent lights and, the way that this sounds like tweaks my nervous system. And, there's this kind of sensitivity that we can, we need to only, have soft things around us. Or, there's just this kind of sensitivity that I think, especially as you kind of, some people, as they get more spiritual, they get more particular about what's okay and what's not okay. And so in India, it's like all of that just blows up, like horns are honking at you. You are like in the middle of chaos. Nobody is waiting for you. The cars just zoom by. Like if you have a super sensitive nervous system, you're kind of like, it's tough. So it toughens you up, in this way of, what my teacher talks about is we have to be the self-mastery has to come from a place that we're so anchored within ourselves, grounded, rooted in our truth, in our love, in our soul consciousness, really, that no matter what happens on the surface, no matter what waves of the ocean, there's like, if we use the ocean as the metaphor, the ocean of consciousness, there's the depth of the consciousness, and we're rooted in that depth of consciousness so that the waves, these ripples, these like chaos, doesn't actually impact us anymore, so that we can stay impactful and relevant in the world no matter what's happening. So no matter what stress or intense situations, storms blow through, we can show up in a way that we're like anchored, we can and be of service, as opposed to be so sensitive that we can't help or show up in a way that's actually impactful.
Is there a specific experience in India that you can talk about where you fell into the soul space and you became even more anchored? I mean, obviously your evolution, you've been cultivating for a long time, but was there some kind, because I've interviewed cats that were hanging with Maharaji, and you hear stories about Ram Dass, and there's all, but I'm not talking about eating LSD and not changing your personality. I'm just talking about being in a place where the yogic tradition goes back thousands of years. It's not a boutique thing. And then how did you fall into how did you drop from your heart to your soul there?
It's hard for me to pinpoint a moment, I think, where that felt like it happened. I feel like for me, the transmission of being on that land, and
just on the land,
just connected to the land there, being in the mountains, where I've been staying, hanging out there, is a little bit up into the mountains outside of Rishikesh, so it's got a very pristine, natural energy. And there's a little tributary of Ganga that flows by, and we meditate on this river every morning. And I was teaching in this beautiful yoga studio there to this group of students, and then we would do satsang with Anand, which satsang is like a question and answer. You come and bring any question you have, and the master teacher, just starts to speak to that. And these teachings went in really deep. And, one of them actually, I don't know if we talked about it before, but he teaches about this, and this felt very true for me, that we can understand something at the level of the mind, the concept, like what is, nonviolence at the level of the mind. That ahimsa, we can get that, like, okay, not being violent to someone, we're not speaking harsh words, or we can get that here. But it's not really anchored in our being, and then once it kind of gets to the level of the heart, we start to have more of an embodied experience of that. Like, wow, in my body, that's what nonviolence feels like. I can approach something from a place that I'm not maybe over-efforting or forcing too hard something. Like, what does that actually feel like? I feel like that's kind of the level of the heart. And then once it anchors down into the level of the soul, that's where you really get it. It's like the word grok. I love that word.
How do you spell it?
G-R-O-K, I believe. I don't even know where it came from, but this word grok, it's like you get it in your cells, in every part of your being. So that for me was India around yoga. It was an understanding that, yoga is so much more than this physical practice these forms that we put our bodies in, even though that's a beautiful, powerful thing to put our bodies in these geometric, amazing forms. Really, yoga is a awakening of consciousness and a transcendence of limitation, of feeling like we're separate, feeling like we're isolated beings in this only physical form, to understanding that actually we're energy, and actually, we're in relationship to everything all the time. And there is a unity consciousness that we attain through the practices of yoga, through the wisdom of yoga, that actually, lives here in our third eye. And we can have an embodied experience of really working our energy, our kundalini, our pranic body to the place of actually getting that on a soul level. So for me, that was what India did. It was like, take it out of the level of concept. What is this unity consciousness thing? We're separate people here. What does that mean that we're all one? Like, we kind of know that on some conceptual level.
Yeah.
But what does it actually feel like? to actually having a visceral embodied experience that we can actually live life a different way.
Meaning you don't have to live life by the rules that Western society says you should live them by?
Absolutely. Like, we don't have to navigate with stress and over effort and ambition, and like we have to, you know, force things to happen. I feel like there's such a forcing of life here in the West. And India really taught me that actually we can just allow the creative life force to flow through, whether you call that God, the divine, love, nature, whatever you want to call it, that energy that is so much greater than any of us can actually guide us, and we can get out of our own way, the mind and even the will of like, I'm gonna make something happen here, and actually co-create with that energy and allow it to flow and stream through us in the particular way that it does, because each of us is different. And I think that's another thing that Western culture, you know, it's so much comparison, like, oh, I gotta be, you know, as good as that person in this or that, or I'm not good enough and I want to be like that, or, you know, there's so much around striving outside of ourselves to attain and achieve something, like, you know, the magazines and the pictures and the this and the that. Our culture is so oriented towards achieving something outside of ourselves, and the yogic path actually teaches us to turn within and to look inside and to understand that we are each an embodiment of the same unity consciousness, the same light, the same love, but it streams through us in a different way. So I'm not going to actually express that the same as you, Jake. And
definitely not, because I couldn't express it as good as you.
Well, no one's going to express it the same way.
Right.
You know, it's like a snowflake. And so what I feel like is the mission, you know, on the planet at this time, as we are kind of elevating consciousness and going through our journey of evolution collectively, is that each and every one of us gets to rise, gets to embody the fullness of our own creative potential, our own divine potential, embody the divinity that streams through us in the unique way that only we can embody. But that doesn't, you know, it's like one of the examples, like the mango tree is not trying to be the willow tree. You know, they're both beautiful and amazing and exceptionally powerful in their beingness. But here in the West, we think we're not good enough as we are, and we try to be like something else. But each of us has a design, an innate human design, that we can actually serve in the way that we're meant to serve. That's one of the huge things that India has taught me.
I mean, that is an amazingly wonderful answer to that question. I want to know, this is turning to healing for a minute. In this time that we're in, one of the biggest obstacles I see is greed. And I wonder about people that come to you that are dealing with the fixation on materialism and greed, and how you heal them, or how you go about healing them. Because I know bankers, investment bankers in New York that lost their mind, and they're here now. They're somewhere in this vicinity trying to heal. But the misinterpretation of meditation, again, I'm only I just try to get to a meditative place. I know I can't really do authentic meditation. I'll explain that to you later. But the point is, it's not peaceful. It can be a really painful experience, meditation. It can be full of, you're dealing with your mind.
Absolutely.
So greed, just focus on greed and how to heal greed. Because you talk about all these life cycles, we speed up everything now. Everything grows. You used to have seasonal growth. Now it just grows all year. We're pushing. We're not satisfied. We have to keep pushing. Same thing with greed. More.
Yeah.
More cars, more material.
Well, greed comes, it's similar to many of these types of vibrations. You know, greed, jealousy, guilt, shame. I don't know. There's like, they're all wrapped up. I feel like it's hard to necessarily just take one and be like, this one. Because they're all they're all a sense of separateness. They're all a sense of, I'm not enough as I am here within myself, like just like we were talking about, and I need to attain something outside of myself. I need to have more. So this over-consumerism is this focus on the outer world, and that will bring happiness. That when I have more cars or more money or more houses or more yachts or more whatever, you know, it's gonna fill something in me that's empty. And you know, the truth is that's never gonna work, and we've all probably experienced or seen or felt people who've gone on that path and attained everything they wanted to attain, and then do they actually feel happy? No, they need more again, or something has to change, or there's a drama that comes up and they lose it all, or because that's actually not the inner peace and happiness they're looking for. So I think that, okay, so how I would approach that.
Has anyone ever come to you and said, I'm trying to wean myself off of materialism?
I think that if a person has that much consciousness, they're already speaking a different language, perhaps. So
what would the language? Okay. Anyway, go ahead. How would you try to heal?
Well, I think that one thing about my approach is that I'm never healing anyone else. It's all about the person being ready and willing and able to heal themselves. There's a support and a container that I can provide, and I love to provide that for people who are like ready, who've like stepped in, and just to sort of say I'm seeking this is huge for people. Like, it is a step in. And I think that one of my teachers would say that any symptom you're experiencing is a gift. It's a gift in strange wrapping paper. It's a gift because your subconscious mind is ready to heal something. So whether it's maybe you've lost everything, maybe someone has had all this greed and tried, and then they've come to a place, there's like pain there. There's always a pain that will spark a desire for healing. Because otherwise, there's not really a reason. So there's a pain that they come in with that is where we start. And it's sort of like, how can we go into that pain, and what is really underneath the surfaces, and the subconscious mind is powerful. It's like it's like a iceberg, above the surface of the water there's a very small amount, and then underneath the surface of the water is this mass. And that's how the mind works. It's like the conscious mind is very little, and the subconscious, unconscious is enormous. So the work with healing is always to get down into those layers of the unconscious, subconscious mind in order to really find the root cause, which in the yogic tradition it's a separation. It's this feeling of disconnection. It's like the disconnect from our soul, which the soul is always connected. It's like there's that Brahmic, that great unity consciousness. But when we believe in our mind that we're disconnected from that, that's where all of that pain comes from. So in a simple kind of dualistic way of speaking about it, we can just be like, wow, we're either in love or fear. And the fear is where all of that is going to come from. So whether it's greed or whether it's some other version of fear, that's what you're working with. Being able to get down into those layers is really important because, mostly we get stamped with our patterns, with our limitations, with our traumas when we're very young. So between the ages of 0 and 7, and some people would say past lives, and there's all of that too, but between the ages of 0 and 7, when our brain is not fully in our conscious mind yet, we're in the brain waves where we just absorb everything into us. And what many say is that, what we absorb it's not ours, it's programming. It's like things that our parents or our families have told us, the collective has given. It's sort of like put it in there, and it's like program. It's a cultural bias, family kind of ingrained stuff, or is it habitual nature? Your own habitual nature? No, what I'm speaking of now is that this is all kind of given, put in on you. Like, you're not good enough. What are these belief systems? You have to
learned, yeah.
Be quiet. Speak before. Like
speak when spoken to.
Speak, keep small. Shaming for our bodies or whatever it might be. There's so many of these things that come from the outside. And I think also we carry these karmas in with us, the samskaras. There's certainly that spiritual perspective, like we're bringing things in. But simply in this lifetime, from 0 to 7, there's a lot that gets absorbed and stuffed out into that subconscious realm, because that's the brain state we're really in at that point. We're not in the conscious mind. And so so many people think like, okay, affirmations, let me think my way out of this. We can't do that. We can't think our way out of it. We have to
You can't think your way out.
We cannot
profound.
think our
it's
way
very
out
important.
Out of it. We have to go into the layers of our subconscious and into the energy body. The chakras in the yogic system, there are energy vortices that are stages of evolution of consciousness. And so in the chakras, we hold a lot of these traumas. Like the second chakra in particular is where addiction, all of these like limiting conditioned patterns and behaviors, so much is held in our second chakra. And in order to get in there, it's like you can't think your way into that. You have to feel your way. You have to be willing to like get uncomfortable, be willing to really sit in the mystery, sit in the unknown. I like to talk about it as if sometimes the unknown is scary. Who's not scared of the unknown? Change happens, we freak out, it's hard to go through change. But the willingness to be in that messiness is kind of what we were talking about before, where it feels really confusing, overwhelming, we don't have a sense of direction, we don't know what's going to happen, maybe we lose our job, maybe we get sick, maybe we lose a loved one. These big life events can spark this like very intense what's happening and where am I, and I've lost control, and that really brings up a lot of fear for people. And so the willingness to be able to sit in these uncomfortable discomfort zones in the realm of uncertainty and to allow that to start to speak to you, I mean, that's huge in healing. That really, being able to get into those layers. And so in some of the work I do, all of the work, the healing work I do, it's really about helping people access those deeper layers. So there's a actual working out some of that trauma, some of those limiting beliefs, like getting down to that root moment even. Sometimes there was, maybe we were a kid and like, something happened, a dog, almost bit us, and that went in really deeply, and now we have a fear of dogs our whole life, or, the smell of the grass when that happened brings up these trauma responses. That's all held in the energy body. That's these subconscious patterns that are held way below the conscious mind. So being able to get into these and release them from that place, that's healing. That's where healing happens. As well as I feel like there's an understanding that, we are infinite beings and we're not just limited by our sense of separation or the ego. So for me, there's both. It's like a transpersonal like understanding of who we are as spiritual beings, and then also, the minutia, the getting into our personal process and journey and liberating these stuck energies that block our chi, our life force from flowing.
Talking to Dayna Seraye here on the Jake Feinberg Show, and she's already enlightening a lot of people around the world. I want you to, for all young girls that are going to watch this, or even women that are liberated or, looking to, I want you to go back to the shores of the Potomac or wherever you went as a young, you weren't that young, but you were experimenting in your own shamanic practices with your friends. You would go to the river, you would be creative. This is before you were like vociferously reading all these texts, I assume, but you were already tapped into it at a very young age. And I wanted you to talk about one of these experimental shamanic things that you did, because anybody can do it, anybody can go and do that.
Yeah. Well, I remember times of going with my friends to the river and drumming. This is something that we would do. We would drum and we would dance and we would kind of get wild. And I think that's something that we've lost a lot in our culture.
We've lost what?
We've lost this ability to get wild.
Some people would say it's at a bar, at watching music.
Sure, there are certainly ways, maybe I would say less conscious ways of getting wild. That is absolutely prevalent all over the place, because people need that. They need the release. They need to move energy, because we do kind of stay stuck and in a box, like the conditioning, the way we're supposed to be, what we're supposed to do, how we're supposed to sound, what's right and what's wrong is very heavily put on us. So for me, there was like a liberation of energy that happened when I would go and just let my body move and dance and drum and sing, and it was like that ecstatic expression, I feel, is so needed for young people. And when they don't get it in a healthy way, they seek it through drugs, through alcohol, through sex, through whatever, unhealthy, maybe more unhealthy ways that they can find it. So these rites of passage, what did I do? I did an Outward Bound trip when I was 16. I was also at a counselor at a camp in nature, and so like being in nature was huge for me, and being able to let some of my inhibitions go, which for me always came through dance. I was actually cleaning out my garage just yesterday and read through this essay I'd written about this experience of dancing. It was called Diva in the Night, and I went through this. I was like in high school, and I read this description of
Diva in the Night,
wildness. That like it was sort of it's like an embodied shamanic experience of letting yourself get out of your mind and out of the way, and just move and just allow expression, allow creative life force to flow through. That's huge. I mean, I feel like every single person on this planet can use that every single day, just allowing energy to move in the way that intuition guides that. And, it was fun to read that and just be like, wow, I'm still the same. I still do that, So that liberated, whatever it is for you. Some people it's painting or drawing, or, some people it's skydiving maybe, but being able to get a little wild, or a lot wild, and allow our bliss to come out, I think that's huge.
Is it also predicated on being wild in the wild, like in nature?
I think so. I think it's very healing for us to be in nature and connect to our natural rhythms. There's something that I would say most people probably go into nature, and there's a quality of stillness that comes in, a quality of the mind, the busyness, because we're very empathic beings, whether we know we are or not. We're very influenced by all of the thought forms and all of the collective unconscious. I feel like it's very influential. So when we're surrounded by that all the time, it can be hard on the nervous system, hard on the body. And so when we go in nature, we find the peace of nature, and that's what we get, infused with. And
then you can get wild.
Well, some people might get still,
Right, but you were dancing and playing drums with your friends. I want young girls especially to feel the ability.
I feel like vocalizing is huge. We've lost this. I was telling you in another interview, I was told that I couldn't sing, and so I shut down my voice. I think that's a very common thing in indigenous cultures all over the world. Everybody sang. Everybody let their voices rip. There was no like, wow, you can't, or you're good and you're not. There was a understanding that was healing.
Yeah.
There was something healing in just being able to express the soul essence as it shines through us. So I feel like for young girls to dance and to sing and to find safe spaces, because there's also, we need to feel safe. We live in a world that has not necessarily made us feel safe, and that's important. It's not like go get wild wherever, find a safe container, a group or a community, or a conscious dance event, or rites of passage programs, something with a mentor that can actually hold a little bit of safety. Because I feel like especially young girls who've had some trauma, it's not like, wow, just go get wild anywhere.
No.
Find a safe container where you can start to unwind some of that inhibition, some of that insecurity. I mean, insecurity is so rampant these days, and it's so sad because we need to all really find our inner power. That's what we're being asked to do on the planet, and to rise up into that power. And so find a safe container and someone you can trust, some people you can trust. Maybe it's your girlfriends, maybe, you can kind of go and get experimental and let our voices out, let our bodies move. You don't need drugs or substances to do this. You simply need a container. Maybe it's, a really good piece of music, and you just start to explore your body a little bit. And by starting to let the energy move, it really does bring us into our truth and power and essence in a way that I find is incredibly powerful and makes us feel whole. Because when we've stuck, when we keep ourselves stuck and contracted, it doesn't feel good. It feels good to move and to open and to get expansive.
One reason I seek out Dayna as a teacher is because she actually has an incredibly clear way of articulating some of these mythological stories. You told one about Durga in our last interview. Could you share another divine feminine mythological story for the audience that has resonated with you at any point in your...
So yeah, I'd love to share a story in goddess, so from a totally different tradition than the Hindu. And Inanna is an archetype that teaches us how to face the unknown and face the shadows and face the darkness and get really vulnerable, and how that leads us into our power. So the story of Inanna is that she's in the earthly realm, in this realm, she's the queen. She's like the goddess, the queen. She has everything. She's got her jewels in her kingdom, and everybody respects her, and she's just living the life, really. And that's beautiful.
The material life.
The material life. She's got everything pretty,
right,
settled here. And she's got this dark sister. Her, twin sister is the dark half, and she's in the underworld, and she is mean and ugly and vicious, and sort of the opposite of everything that Inanna is, of this light half. And Inanna makes the conscious choice at a certain point. She hears the call. She needs to evolve. There's a next step.
Yes.
There's a next step. And so she hears this call, and she decides it's time to go visit her sister, Ereshkigal, in the underworld. And she does some really beautiful, powerful things. One is that she does not go down into this underworld journey without telling some friends where she's going and to watch out for her. So she gets her allies, and she says, make sure if I'm not back in 3 days, you come looking for me. So this is an important part of the story, because we don't want to go on these really intense healing underworld journeys without having support and allies who can
or
watch
just
out
people
for
that
us.
know that you're doing it.
People that know we're doing it and that can have our back, that can hold a safe space for us. So she starts to go down into this underworld journey, and there's 7 gates. And so as she passes through each of these gates, there's a gatekeeper. And at each of these gates, she has to strip off some of her worldly attire. So her crown comes off at the next gate, her throat. I can't remember all the different pieces, but there's a protection that she's come in with that is stripped at each gate of these 7 gates. And so she goes down, and then eventually when she arrives in the underworld, she's naked, vulnerable. She has no protection, and it's just raw, real and raw. Nothing to hide.
But in the underworld, though.
In the underworld,
not a safe space.
Not a safe space, exactly. And she gets there, and her sister Ereshkigal is there, and she's pissed. She's so pissed, and she kills her. She takes her, and she grabs her sister, and she kills her, and she hangs her on a hook, leaves her carcass there to rot. And luckily, Ereshkigal had left her allies there that knew what to do. After 3 days, she didn't come back up, so these allies came seeking. They found her. She had a few fathers. They went to different places. They found the support that she needed to, they sent down these little beings that actually went and found Ereshkigal. And she was in so much pain, this dark sister. She was so much suffering, so much grief, so much anger, so much rage. And they sat with her in her grief. And they said, they loved her through her grief. They allowed her to be so sad and this ability to meet that pain was what actually made Ereshkigal change her mind and release Inanna. And so there's so many layers to this story.
But so you were saying the carcass came back to life.
Inanna comes back to life.
Wow.
She takes all that she has received from this journey in the underworld, and she passes back up through all these gates, and she emerges, having gone on this journey of seeing her own shadow, having met her own death. Because Ereshkigal is really just her other half, it's the side of us, it's the dark, it's the shadow. We each have a shadow, these unseen places that we're unwilling to look at, the places we're unwilling to go. We don't want to go there. They're scary, it's painful, it causes all kinds of, distress. Who wants to do that? So, but her conscious choice to go do that and to, have the allies in place, go down, die, surrender completely her ego, this part of us that I'm protecting myself and I'm okay, and surrender that completely all the way down. From that place, she was able to meet her own grief, meet her own pain, love it, see it, and then from there she was able to arise and emerge back into the light of consciousness, bringing all of those parts with her in a beautiful dance of wholeness. So the story is a very healing story because we have to face those parts of ourselves. We have to be willing to go into the dark places, and from there it makes us more whole, it makes us more healthy, and we can from there give so much more of the world because we know pain and we're able to face it.
Before we wrap up, I don't want people to think that you are completely evolved, or that you don't deal with your own internal struggles. And you talked about forcing things before, and how our society likes the impatience of society and the rushing of society. And can you talk about your own anatomy in the sense of when, I can't exactly remember, but I saw you talking about your body started to fight your body. There was a physical rejection, or can you talk about how you came into a space to overcome it, or at least live with it? I mean, because
Absolutely.
This is something, this is something that you've encountered along on your journey.
Yeah, I think this is a great conversation. About 7 years ago, I started having kidney issues. So for me, it's an autoimmune kidney. It's very rare. It's kind of strange. But what would happen is that my kidneys stopped filtering properly, and then my body starts swelling. So there was this edema that would happen, and it was really, I was talking about this today to a friend, it was hard because my identity, my ego structure was based on this concept that I was rock star healthy. I had a business called Radiant Health Retreats, and I took people to learn about health, and I was all of a sudden couldn't get health insurance because I had a pre-existing condition.
Wow.
And it was I was wow, this is an ego death. There was a part of me that really had to dig deep to overcome the shame and the embarrassment and just what the hell is happening. I didn't understand it. It was confusing, and some people would just kind of go towards a physical thing, but I always tend to go emotional, spiritual, what are the deeper, what's going on in my subconscious. And I've been on a long journey around that in terms of my own empathic, the kidneys not filtering properly, taking on toxicity. There's been a really long journey. I still deal with this, or the last time I did was about a little over a year ago. It's reoccurred 4 times. I had to go to Western medicine. The first time it happened, I spent a really long time trying to not have to go to Western medicine because I didn't believe in it. I have a 14-year-old son, he's never taken antibiotics. I'm not really that interested in having to do Western medicine. And so that was also wow, I'm grateful for Western medicine. I am, acknowledging that this is a really important thing. And I'm grateful for the relief it gave my body in these moments where this dis-ease came up and I couldn't deal with it in another way. So my journey has been very full in terms of really working with a lot of different modalities to work with this. And the most recent time it happened just over a year ago, I sort of, because I spent a lot of time maybe over efforting to try to figure it out, why, what, and how can I, and this last time it was sort of I might never know. I actually might never figure this out. This might be something that's with me for the rest of my life. I might have to deal with this for the rest of my life. And there was a surrender in that for me. It was it's okay, maybe after I pass and I'm in my life review, I'll get it. I'll understand what all of the implications of this. But there's been a evolution of my own process, my soul, that's had to deal with this very disorienting physical thing. And I know a lot of friends right now who are getting cancer, who are really in the throes of some really intense physical disease that doesn't make sense on a spiritual or emotional level. You know, I have all these friends who are amazing, beautiful, radiant, conscious people, and they're getting breast cancer, and they're getting, you know, different types of cancer, and we don't know. It's a mystery. We live in this world where we can't know everything, and it's planned that way.
The commercial impression is that everything is knowable now, and that there are no unknowns. I mean, I think that's if you can't go beneath the surface, then you're under the impression that all these serious inclement weather here. But you have to seek, because there is the unknown. Not everything is known. Not everything is quantifiable.
Well, I mean, yoga would tell us that really that's the greatest blessing, is when we settle into that place of unknown. That's where the magic happens. You know, one of this great yogic sayings is, the more you know, the more you realize you don't know anything.
Yeah.
And so there's that, you know, spiritual understanding that as we evolve, as we progress, we unknow. We undo, we untie all of this conditioning, all of this need to know and to control, which is really based in our ego identity, thinking that we can actually manage this life in some way. When really, look, you know, the wind comes through. What are we going to do about it? You know, there's nothing we can do. We just actually
we can sing. Yeah.
Hopefully we surrender and like feel good. Wow, you know, and the moment of, you know, this is a pretty amazing life we're living in. When we release our control and just allow ourselves to surrender into the mystery, that's where the magic and the blessing force is in my.
Before we leave, can you sing a mantra for us? This amazing natural force.
Well, I will sing to the wind because
Good.
This is not a Hindu mantra or Sanskrit mantra. This is a song of Beyonce, who is the Orisha of the wind in the Brazilian, Afro-Brazilian Orisha tradition.
Feinberg Show. See you later.